now and into the long term.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the adoption side, when you look at the statistics and you look at behavior, low-income individuals will adopt at the same rate as other individuals. The question is, what applications are available, and are we doing anything particularly on the literacy side, on the human capital side, helping individuals who might have some literacy or language barriers to be able to adopt to using the Internet. But in terms of the aspiration, the goal, it's there for everybody, and it's just as strong with that population. There isn't any inherent inhibition to wanting to use broadband or the Internet in terms of that population.
I thank the gentleman, and I thank him for his work in that area. To the gentleman from Florida, I have a bit of a problem right now. I have not made this roll call, so I have to run over to make the roll call. And is the gentlelady going to go over and make the roll call as well? Okay, well, then we won't have a member in the majority to chair.
Yeah. Already voted on.
I was hoping that that was the case. So, well, again, we'll take a brief 10-minute recess, and the first Democrat that arrives who has made the roll call, we will ask them to reconvene the hearing and recognize the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Stearns. We'll take another brief recess. The Subcommittee on Telecommunications and Internet is reconvened. We apologize again to our witnesses. Congressional efficiency is an oxymoron like jumbo shrimp or Salt Lake City nightlife. There is no such thing, and so this delay is something that is unavoidable but a part of an integral part of our system. Let me turn and recognize the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Stearns.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't know if Utah is going to appreciate your comments, but before I start, I didn't hear Mr. Sullivan's opening statement, but I did look through it during the break, and I just want to commend him for what he's doing for the prisoners and working with the facilities there to get the support so that prisoners can actually talk to their families. And I notice, as he pointed out, that Florida is #1 in terms of providing support for the prisoners so they can speak to their families and also, in some ways, help their children through that connection. Mr. May, I'm going to start out my question for you, which is Mr. Barton and I are dropping a bill dealing with universal service. As all the members know, it's $7 billion a year, of which most of the fraud, waste, and abuse that we've talked about is in the high-cost portion of that. The other portion is a low-cost as well as a rural health care, and then the E-rate, which Mr. Lucas has talked about. But if you would tell me just briefly why the Barton bill what it would do to solve this problem, and maybe that would help all of us.
Thank you, Mr. Stearns. And in my written testimony, I did point out some very good features concerning the Barton bill that I didn't have a chance to address earlier. But basically, the Barton bill does these things, which I think are very important in terms of actually furthering the principles that I talked about in my oral testimony. Number one, it caps the size of the funds, which is important to do to staunch the growth that everyone's talked about that has led to the 11% surtax that everyone pays now. Number two, the Barton bill relies on a competitive bidding mechanism to affect the distribution of funds. So, and over time, this and this competitive mechanism is frequently referred to as reverse auctions. They've been talked about now for several years. There have been studies on this type of mechanism. But what it would do would be, over time, it should ratchet down the subsidies to these high-cost areas as providers of last resort. There would be one provider that would be awarded the subsidy under the reverse auction, and because of the technology continuing to improve and so forth, competition, the subsidy should go down. And then finally, and this is important, on the financing side, it adopts a broad-based type of approach, largely an assessment on numbers, which is broader than the current regime, and that's a good thing as well. So it does those things which are very important.
You heard Mr. Lucas said he recommend raising the $2.25 billion cap on the E-rate program and extending it to provide free broadband for schools. Do you recommend that, yes or no? Just yes or no?
No, not as stated.
Okay.
There's no free lunches.
All right, Mr. Lucas, as I pointed out, or you've pointed out, that you want to provide free broadband to schools. Right now, under the universal service and the E-rate, some of the most wealthy communities in the country, for example, Greenwich, Connecticut, gets a subsidy of about $248 million a year, and then Berkeley Hills, their library, gets $75 million a year. So this is being funded some of the most expensive libraries in the country, and perhaps they don't need it. Do you think perhaps we could do this without raising the rate? Perhaps just try to find some way in the E-rate program to maybe find some efficiency here?
Could I just say that when you meant 1,000, not million?
Yeah, 1,000. Excuse me, 1,000. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I beg $248,000
Okay, thank you.
for Greenwich, Connecticut. $75,000 for Berkeley Hills. Yes.
What I'm suggesting is, as we move into the future, most everything is going to end up wireless. And as it ends up wireless, you're going to be auctioning off bandwidth. And as you auction this off, all I'm saying is, why don't you just hold some back for schools and libraries? It doesn't cost you anything. You don't have this cumbersome system of taking money and then giving it back. You simply say, this is an area you can't exploit, and that's the price you pay to get this bandwidth or get these frequencies.
Would you consider going into the high-cost part of the Universal Fund, where most of us all talk about, not all the members agree here, as you could hear, but in the high-cost portion, do you think there's a possibility of eliminating waste and the fraud that's in that program and transferring it over to the E-rate instead of using your language of raising the cap on the E-rate program?
Well, I mean, the raising the cap is a short-term solution. You're going to have to ask yourself, again, in all of these, I think we all agree that having this service is extremely important to our country. It's extremely important to the educational system. It's extremely important to the people that have been left behind and to bring them back into society. And, you know, arguing about who's going to pay and how it's going to work, that's basically the job of you guys to figure that out. If I had an answer, I'd say this is the way you can do this. The service is necessary. It needs a lot of really bright minds and clever people to figure out how to solve that problem. I'm not advocating, I haven't read the bill, but anything that works. I'm a taxpayer too, I think that the cheaper you can do it, the better.
So, Mr. Chairman,
but the service has to be provided.
I assume that Mr. Lucas is endorsing the Barton bill today. Is that what you hear?
I'm just saying, as a taxpayer, I'm saying do it as the most inexpensive way possible.
All right.
Cut the waste. And as somebody that's advocating schools, or whether it's prisons, or whether it's the Internet, or whether it's Internet access to the underserved, that has to happen somehow. So you have to figure out how to do that. It's just like roads. I mean, why don't we just get rid of all the roads and replace it with the internet. Because, you know, we got gas problems, we got car problems, we got everything. Why don't you just take all the money you spend on roads and spend it on the internet? Because, hey, you know, 150 years ago, that's what they would have done. They spent it on roads.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chair recognizes the gentleman from Washington State.